Hello, everyone. Welcome back to BNB Build and Bet, the show where we build the case and place your bets on where AI is really headed. I'm Mani here, as always, with my co host, Preethi.
Welcome back. Great to be here. Money, before we get into today's topic, I have to stop and give you some flowers and congratulations here on your new book launch. That's a massive milestone and honestly, well deserved too. I mean, given everything that's going on, you've been building and teaching in this space, this is amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. I actually have the book over here, so let me show you. I think it took us a lot of time, and I want to share kudos to my co author, Dr. Fuad, as well. And I'm just thrilled that people are picking it up, and I really appreciate you calling it out.
Of course, and I want to tell our audience to go grab a book if you haven't already. We'll share the link in the notes. So, big congrats and let's get into today's topic, right? It's a fun one.
Yes.
So, the theme today for this episode is something we both have been watching very closely: open weight models, catching up with the frontier models. For a long time, the narrative was open weight models are good enough and cheap, high volume tasks. But if you want to level up reasoning, you want to go to the closed models. That gap is narrowing super fast now.
Yeah, and it's just not narrowing it on paper. It's actually narrowing it on the benchmarks that actually matter for production workloads. So let's take an example, right? So if you have like coding, agentic tool use, long context reasoning, all of these workloads, like 6 months ago, the idea was that if you have open weight model going toe to toe with a flagship closed model on real coding benchmark, it was like it felt aspirational. But now we can see it happening.
Absolutely. I mean, the leaderboard is changing every day. That there's a structural reasoning for it too. Mixture of experts architectures, which is like combining your large model with a smaller model, are letting labs scale total parameter counts massively by actually keeping the inference cost manageable. So you get frontier model scale capacity without frontier scale serving cost.
Yeah, and which I feel is a perfect setup like for today's example as well, because there is a model that just dropped that basically embodies this whole trend, right?
Absolutely. I mean, let's talk about this model Kimi K3 a little bit, right? Moonshot AI announced this mid-July, and looking by the parameter count, the largest open model ever released. This is like a 2.8 trillion billion parameter model. Full weights shipped a couple of weeks later under an open license.
Yeah, and if you look at the
This is
architecture, I think that's a very interesting part also. It's a sparse mixture of experts setup, which has like 896 experts in total, but only 16 are active per token. So even though the headline number is 2.8 trillion parameters, the actual compute goes like per forward pass looks more like 50 billion active parameters. And the trick that makes a model this size economically deployable at all is this particular caveat that people don't understand. So I think it's a good call out.
absolutely. An interesting thing is that they also introduced something called as Kimi Delta Attention, paired with what they call the attention residuals. This is a hybrid attention mechanism designed to let information flow through more efficiently for a very long sequences. I think it's a big leap here, and it comes to with a full 1 million token context window plus native vision support. I mean, there's a lot of technical jargon here. I want you to simplify.
Yes, and I think we should simplify this a little bit. So, people who are not aware of what attention is, so attention is what has made this big, a breakthrough in frontier models. So, the basic, in simple words, think of attention as there is a big sentence, and if you want to make sure that the model takes the previous context into the attention to give the reply back, and models usually generate like one token at a time, but for the first time, they can read like a whole prompt, right? So they need to understand the previous context in order to provide the response back and predict what the next word would be. So we call it as like attention mechanism. There is more technical stuff to it as well. It's not the full story, but just to give you an idea of what attention is, right? And which and by Preeti, what you just mentioned about the attention residuals, a hybrid linear attention mechanism, because there are different types of attention mechanisms. One is flash attentions, again, mathematical way of making the attention very fast, because you can imagine if there is a big prompt, then the attention will need to have big number of calculations, right? So with all of these different techniques like attention residuals, which is hybrid linear attention mechanism, let's put some context window class as the current frontier closed models. That's, I think, a notable for open weight release, and that's why all these attention mechanisms actually matter.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much behind that. When you want to dig deeper, right? We could do tons of topics and discussions around that. But I am curious more on that part. Like Moonshot is also framing K3 as roughly 2.5 times more scaling efficient than their prior model K2. This is significant, again, jump, meaning that they're converting compute into capability more effectively, generation over generation, not just by brute force scaling, but it's also like, cost wise.
Yeah, and when you're picking up the cost thing, actually on pricing, it's very competitive, but not the steep discount that open models used to carry. If you look at the API pricing, because you can use Kimi K3 with different model inference providers. So if you look at the and use it as an API rather than deploying it on your own, I mean that's another option which you can choose if you want to. But if you look at the API pricing, it lands close to the low end of the closed model flagship tier, though still cheaper on per token basis than the very top closed models. And the performance that we have seen in the various benchmarks is very comparable to that top closed models.
Right. I think the common question or the big question everybody wants answered right now is how do we compare, like, Cloud Opus or any other big frontier model with this new open weight model?
Yeah, and
What do you think?
I would say the real honest answer is that it depends which lens you look through. And I think that's actually the more useful takeaway than a single winner. On broad, general intelligence composite benchmarks, K3 would land close to Opus tier models and sometimes just ahead, sometimes just a behind, depending on the use case, within a few points. While the very top closed models still hold a lead overall.
Yeah, this is like the coach, right? The sports coach. A basketball coach would be looking for taller people, because that gives them a edge to scoring a basket versus a football coach because looking flexibility with the feet, I think that's where the lens comes into play. Great, well, very well put, I would say. Now, the coding and agentic work, right, when it comes to K3, genuinely stands out, is what I'm reading. And it's posted as the top score on independent front end coding arenas and on some long horizon agentic and browsing benchmarks. So, what's again, would love to hear a little bit more. These leaderboards can be so confusing with so much out there. And we just talked about an analogy, right? I would like to hear your thought around that.
So, where it trails is on some of the harder, more contamination resistant coding evaluations and broader reasoning benchmarks, right? So, that's still where the top closed models keep a real edge. So, it's not open has got closed everywhere. It's more about open has got closed in specific high value categories and it's closing fast on the rest of them.
And I think that's the story worth sitting in, right? This isn't about announcing a winner. It's a signal that the frontier edges and capability just dropped and willing to self host or fine tune that changes the build versus buy math for a lot of teams and organizations. Well put.
Yeah, and if you look at like for builders, what does that mean? That's a real decision point now. If your workload is really coding heavy or agent heavy, an open weight model like K3 might already be good enough and a lot cheaper. If you need the top of the reasoning curve or enterprise trust or compliance tooling and support, I think where that's where closed frontier model still has that edge, because a lot of the, like, I talk to customers almost every day. That's a part of our job, right? Where we see is customers who are part of the regulated industries are still hesitant in using the open weight models. So they would like to go with the closed frontier models. So that's where I feel, those frontier models will still have an edge. So yeah, and additionally, yeah, it also depends on your use case. If you're already in production with some of these models, do you really want to change your model every time? I mean, that's another question. If things are working with you and you are doing really good, your application is out in the production, my thing is, the bigger question is, do I really need to switch? And if I do need to switch, how do I do that? Like, how does my deployment and stuff will work, right? So those are the questions that we need to answer first before actually just saying, like, oh, now there is a new model, let me just switch and it's cheaper. Yeah, it's cheaper, but you have to be careful when you are making the switch. I think that would be my one call out to all the builders, developers, and the business leaders out there.
Yeah, great suggestion. I mean, here's the bit for the week then. Open weight models don't overtake the frontier outright in the next cycle. Gap keeps shrinking category by category, and coding and agentic tasks will be there, where good enough open beats best purely on cost.
Yeah.
That's a definitely a tweet moment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I would be honest, like, as a leader, I will take that bet. And I'd add to it is like, watch the fine tuning and self hosting ecosystems as well around K3 over the next month. And that's usually where you will see the real world verdict play out, not in the launch day benchmarks. And also, like, just on the benchmarks, I'm also doing a course on inference optimization. And the last two episodes, like episode 7 and 6, those episodes actually talk about how do you do the benchmarking, what are the constraints that you keep. So there's a lot of technical stuff. You don't have to watch all the episodes if you're just interested in the benchmarking. This though two short episodes will give you a good idea on how to do benchmarking, what are the metrics that you should be focusing on, and if you have to do the benchmarking on your use case, your data, I think that also becomes an important thing.
It's a great call out. I definitely will do the read up and look into the videos because in fact that's something that I deal with on a day-to-day basis of about inference optimization. Love it. All right. That's our build and bet for the week. Open weight is closing in. Kimi K3 is the proof of the trend, and the frontier just got a lot more interesting to watch.
And again, thank you all for the love on the book and the inference optimization course. It means a lot, and we'll keep bringing new stuff to you.
Yeah, money well deserved on your book. All right. And everyone, that's a wrap. Same time next week for another round of Build and Bet. See you later.
See you later.